my mother's sister had married a man that was due to be one of Australia's best known boat builders, Jock Muir, and he said, come down and work with me for a little while. I'm building a boat. So he was building what turned out to be the Westwood. Westwood sits in Constitution Dock at the moment, having been gifted to the Maritime Museum here in Hobart. And that started my life as a boat builder, and something that I've loved for many, many years. The work I found absolutely fascinating. For a start, it was just doing very basic work, cleaning up, sweeping. At that stage, not even holding the dolly on the head of a nail, because when you're riveting something, somebody has to be riveting on the inside of a boat, somebody has to be holding a dolly, a big lump of steel on the outside onto the head of the nail, so that the nail doesn't come back out. But this had already been done on the Westwood. They were doing work on the deck, so you were helping to brush gooey stuff to seal the deck into place, and start to help fitting out. I can remember one spot within the boat itself. They needed to do some screws up on the inside of cupboards in the cabin, and the only way they could do that was to get inside and do that work. And I was probably by far the smallest person in the area, and so they put me inside this cupboard, and I can still just remember squeezing in there, putting the screws in, and then doing the same sort of thing, coming back out again. That vessel was very successful. It sailed in the 1947 Sydney-Hobart race and won the race, again in 48 and won the race. So Jock had a lot of success with that vessel. I was lucky enough to be on board it in 1948, and he'd asked me if I wanted to sail with him in early 48 on a delivery voyage to Sydney. That just opened my eyes totally. I just loved that. And then I sailed on the Westwood in 1948, up and back. So that was good. That was 5 trips across the strait I'd had by the time I was 16, I suppose, which was wonderful. The work at the yard was excellent. We built a motor launch soon after that and started building a much larger vessel, bigger than the Westwood, to one of Jock's designs. But while this was going on, he was negotiating with the Marine Board to take a lease on property on Battery Point, which is where Muir's Slipyard is now. When that came through, when he was able to get that, we moved all of the gear, a small shed that was on board there, and all of the material for this second large boat down to the Slipyard. We set the boat up, and it was most interesting that old Perth Coverdale lived just along the slightly south of where the Slipyard is, and Perth said, it's funny, I looked out on my window one day and there's nothing there, and I look out on another day and there's a completely set up boat all waiting to have work done on it. And he said it was fascinating to look at it. Anyhow, we started to set that up, but before we could work on that boat, Jock had an offer of building another boat. This is an English design, and a Sydney man said, you can have the contract to build that as long as you've got it ready for the Sydney-Hobart race in 1948. Now, I jumped ahead of myself a little bit, but this was we set up down at the yard in early 1948, and I hadn't sailed on the Westwood until late 48. So we set up in early 1948. He decided to accept the challenge, and we built what was this English design yacht, which turned out to be called the Lass of Luss. Luss is a town on Loch Lomond, and it was where this owner and all of his family came from. The work in this area down at the Battery Point Slipyard was just absolutely absorbing for me. I just loved all the work that we did and all the time we spent there. It was very basic. There was no shelter. We couldn't rig a shelter. We rigged a big pair of large shear legs each end and put a very large log right on the top of that over the whole of the vessel, and then draped tarpaulins over the side of that to get the shelter that we needed if there was any sort of rain or even hard wind from one direction. So the work to the older workers there must have been fairly difficult. To a 16-year-old, it was never a problem for me. It was probably just excitement more than anything. So we built the Lass of Luss. She sailed in the Sydney Hobart race, didn't get a result. In fact, I've got a feeling it might have retired. The Westwood did very well again. She won it, as I said before, I think for the second year in succession. Building down at the yard was, to me, just exciting. When I look at it and reflect on the time down there, it was perhaps a little bit scary. There were a number of things now, when I think about it, that we did that weren't all that wonderful. We were pouring the lead ballast on these vessels, and we're talking about something in the area of 6 to 8 tonnes of actual lead, taken from old car batteries and scrap lead, melting it in a large drum or several large drums. And when it was hot enough and fully molten, we would open the control valve and let it all run into a prepared mould that was made of a weak solution of concrete and so on. But we were inhaling the fumes of all that, and the tyres, we were burning this and heating this up with tyres. We were anti-fouling, coating the bottoms of vessels and even the inside of the well of an old fishing boat. And the well wasn't all that large. The well is a compartment in a boat that allows fish to swim and feel natural within that area. But we coated the whole inside of that with an anti-fouling, a sort of rot and seaweed protection, and that was all coated. And on a hot day, you'd be stripped off from there and you'd be coated yourself with the anti-fouling. And I can remember washing it off my body, and instead of washing it off your body, you're washing it through the pores of your skin. So the whole thing was rather stupid. Anyhow, they were the sort of dangers you remember, as well as lagging exhaust pipes. You'd dampen it down, but you'd also crawl up into the cavity between the cockpit and the side of the boat and then wrap the exhaust pipe in asbestos. And now, people complain about taking a sheet of damaged asbestos off the wall of a shed, but we had to wrap the asbestos around the exhaust pipe. The type of vessel we'd build, we were very lucky, very fortunate. They were well designed from different designers around the world, mainly the English and Americans, and they were a wonderful design, a wonderful performing boat. So we had you know, with the top of the line vessels to build there. Alongside the top of Australia's boat builders, Jock's brother Max was one of the best I've worked with. He had a friend of his come down from Sydney and work with him there. And of course the standard was lifted because these people were there. So I managed to I guess, lift my game at the same time.